Today we will be reading chapter number 4, Timeline and Sources of History. History is unending dialogue between the present and the past, between the society of today and the society of yesterday. We can fully understand the present only in the light of the past. E. H. Carr. National Museum, New Delhi. Such museums preserve objects from the past such as statues, coins and ornaments, all of which help us to understand our past. The big questions. Question number 1. How do we measure historical time? How can various sources help us understand history? How did early humans live? How do we learn about the past? Think about it. What is the earliest memory you can recollect? Do you remember how old you were at that time? Those memories together are a part of your past, maybe going 5 or 6 years back. How do you think understanding the past will help us understanding the present world? You will discover in science that the earth was a very long history, of which we humans occupy only a tiny past, the most recent one. History, the study of the human past. Figure 4.1, Timeline of a few important stages in the evolution of life on earth. Many people study the history of Earth. Some of them are trained to uncover the secrets left beneath the Earth's surface and help us learn about its past and also our past. Figure 4.2.1 Geologist. Figure 4.2.2 Paleontologist. Figure 4.2.3 Archaeologist. Figure 4.2.4 Archaeologist. Observe all 4 pictures and the activities involved from top left. Geologist. Study the physical feature of the earth like the soil, stones, hills, mountains, rivers, seas, oceans and the other such parts of the earth. Paleontologist. Study the remains of the plants, animals and the humans from the millions of years ago in the form of fossils. Anthropologist. Study human society and culture from the oldest time to the present. Archaeologist. Study the past of digging up remains that people, plants and animals left behind such as tools, pots, beads, figurines, toys, bones, teeth of animals and humans, burned grains, part of house or bricks among others. Fossil. Impressions of the footprints or parts of plants or animals that are found preserved within layers of soil or rocks. How is time measured in history? Each society and culture has had its own way of measuring time. Major events such as the birth of an important person or the start of ruler's reign have often marked the beginning of a new era. At present, the Gregorian calendar is commonly used worldwide side by side. Hindu, Muslim, Jewish, Chinese and the other calendar are often used for calculating the date of festival and other auspicious events. Era, the distinct period of time. Gregorian calendar. The calendar now used in the world over. It has 12 months adding up to 365 days and a leap year every 4 years. However, century years, for example 1800, 1900, 2000 are leap years only if they are multiples of 400. So in the 3 centuries years above, only 2000 is a leap year. In the West, the conventional year of Jesus Christ's birth has generally been taken to be the starting point for this calendar. Years are counted forward from this point and used to be marked with AD, an abbreviation for a Latin phrase that refers to the years after Jesus' birth. However, this is now called the Common Era or CE across the world. For example, 1947, the year India gained the independence, can be written as 1947 AD, sometimes AD 1947 or 1947 CE. Similarly, the years before the conventional date for the birth of Jesus are counted backward and used to be marked with BC or before Christ. They are now called the Before Common Era or BCE. For example, 560 BC is an approximate birth of Gautam Buddha, whom we will meet in chapter 7. Can you calculate how many years ago was that? Auspicious, favorable, or bringing luck, for instance, an auspicious beginning. Figure 4.3, timeline of some main events since 300,000 BCE. Let's explore. So, some calculations are simple, but there is a catch. In the Gregorian calendar, there is no year 0. The year 1 CE follows immediately the year 1 BCE. Draw a simple timeline marking every year from 2 BCE to 2 CE. You will see that because of the absence of his 0 year, only 3 years have passed between those two dates. So to calculate the number of years between BCE date and CE date, you should add them but subtract 1. In the above case, 2 plus 2 minus 1 equals to 3. Practice a few examples with your classmates. For example, to return to the question about the Buddha, suppose we are now in the year 2024 CE, when the Buddha was born. 560 plus 2024 minus 1 equals to 2583 years ago. A timeline, see figure 4.3 on page 62 and 63, is a conventional tool to mark such event as it shows a sequence of dates and events covering any particular period. It runs from the beginning of humanity to the present with a few important landmarks. Note that the dotted portion marks a skipped period, otherwise this timeline would have been almost 3 meters long. A timeline also helps in understanding in order which historical event takes place. For example, even without looking at date, you can now see that the birth of Buddha occurs before that of Jesus. Don't miss out. Along with the year and a decade, a period of 10. We often use other terms to understand longer duration of time. Two of these are commonly used when learning about history. Number 1, century. It is any period of 100 years in history. Specific centuries are counted every 100 years starting from the year 1 CE. For instance, we are currently in 21st century CE, which runs from 2001 to 2100. The centuries BCE are calculated beginning from the year 1 BCE and keep going back in time. For example, the 3rd century BCE would include the year 300 BCE to 201 BCE, millennium. It is any period of 1000 years in history. Specific centuries are counted every 1000 years from the year 1 CE. For instance, we are currently in the 3rd millennium CE, which began in 2001 CE and will go up to 3000 CE. As with centuries, millenniums BCE are also calculated beginning from 1 BCE and going backward. So the first millennium BCE would include the year 1 BCE to 1000 BCE. In the timeline given on pages 62 and 63, figure 4.3, can you mark the beginning of 8th millennium BCE? Note in English, the plural of millennium is millenniums or millennia. Both are correct. Let's explore. Create a timeline stretching from 1900 CE to the current year. Place the date of birth of your grandparents, parents, siblings, and yourself. Also mark the year that the 20th century CE begins with and ends with. Don't miss out. Do you know how calendars have been traditionally made in India? Many Indian calendars rely on the position of sun and the moon to define the months of the year. A Panchanga is a book of tables which lists the days of each month along with related astronomical data. For instance, it previously predicts events like solar and lunar eclipse, times for sunrise and sunset, etc. Panchangas, still widely used in India, often also give weather prediction for the year, dates, and timings of festival and more. What are the sources of history? Sources of history: a place, person, text, or an object from which we gather information about some past event or period. Let's explore. Can we collect information at least three generations of your family on mother's and father's side? Create a family tree with your parents, grandparents, and great grandparents. Find out their name, what they did for living, and were they were where they were born. Also, write the sources from where you got this information. How did you find detail about your family's past? Did you rely on things like photographs, diary, ID card, or memories from your parents and relatives? Think about it. Have you ever seen old coin, books, clothes, jewelry, or utensils in and around your house? What type of information can you gain from such objects or from old houses or buildings? Every object or structure tells a story and is like a piece in a jigsaw puzzle. The objects that you see around your house conveying something of the history of your family. Similarly, we can put together historical event through a variety of sources, but keep in mind that in the case of history, quite a few pieces of puzzle may remain missing. Observe the figure at the bottom of the page. It brings together the main sources of history. You do not need to remember them all now. We will use some of them as we go along. When historians study, say, a king or queen of 1500 years ago, an ancient monument, a war of some items of trade, they take great care to gather information from as many sources as they can find and consult. Sometimes the sources confirm each other, the jigsaw pieces match. At the other times, sources may give contradictory information, the jigsaw pieces do not match, in which case they need to decide which source they can trust more. That is how they try to recreate the history of the period they are studying. Historian: a person who studies and writes about the past. Who contributes to these sources of history? Historians themselves, but also archaeologists, epigraphists who study ancient inscriptions, anthropologists who study human societies and their cultures, experts in literature and languages, and some more. In addition, in the last 50 years and so, scientific study have been contributing more and more to the reconstruction of the past. For example, studies of ancient climates, chemical studies of evacuated materials, and study of the genetics of Asian people have provided fresh insight which supplement the more usual sources. And when historians study recent history, which usually means the last 2 or 3 centuries, another source in newspaper. For the last few decades, the electronic media, television, the internet, etc. can also be consulted. Genetics, the branch of biology that studies how in plant, animals, or humans certain features and characteristics get passed down from one generation to the next. Let's explore. There are few images of different sources of history on next page. Who and what do you think the objects show? Write down in the box next to the image any information that you get from these objects. The beginning the beginnings of human history. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, have walked the planet about 300,000 3 lakhs years, which appear to be very long time, yet it's only a tiny fraction of Earth's history. Let us have a quick look at our early history. Let's explore the above picture. Look at some activity of early humans in a rock shelter. Which one can you recognize? Give a brief description of each. Early humans faced many challenges from nature and lived in bands or groups to help each other. They were constantly seeking shelter and food and were mainly hunters and gatherers. This means that they rely on hunting and collecting edible plants and fruits for their survival. Our early ancestors also had certain beliefs about the natural elements and possibly also some notion of afterlife. Afterlife, a life that begins after death. These groups lived in temporary camps, rock shelter, or caves and communicated with each other using languages that are now lost. They used fire and started making objects that make their life easier, like improved stone axes and blades, arrowheads, and other tools. Aspects of their life are visible in rock painting found in thousands of caves all over the world. Some of those paintings depict simple figures or a few symbols. Others are more detailed and represented scenes with animals or humans. In time, these early humans learned to make simple ornaments such as stone or shell beads, pendants made of animal teeth, or sometimes exchange them with other groups. The first crops. Over long ages, the Earth's climate have gone through many changes. At certain times, it was very cold, and much of Earth was covered with ice. This is called an ice age, as you will learn in greater detail in science. Later, when the climate warmed up, this ice partly melted, and the resulting water swelled the existing rivers and eventually drained into the oceans. The last ice age lasted from over 1 lakh years ago to around 12,000 years ago. Afterwards, living conditions improved for humans in many parts of the world. They started settling down and cultivating cereals and grains. They also domesticated animals such as cattle, goats, etc. With more food available, these communities grew in size and number and often settled down near rivers. This was not only because of the availability of water but also because the soil would be more fertile there. It made the process of growing crops easier. Let's explore, observe the scene on the next page. It depicts an agriculture community from a few millennia ago. List the main activity you can identify. Think about it. Both in the early picture of rock shelter and in this one, men and women are giving certain rules. While they may appear to be natural, they are not necessarily accurate and do not cover all situations. For instance, in a rock shelter, women may have helped prepare color for painting the rock or may have done some of the painting. In both scenes, men may have done some of the cooking or may have helped take care of children. Keeping in mind that we have only limited information, think about such roles and situations and discuss in class. As communities grow, so did their social complexity. Leaders of chieftains were responsible for the well-being of the people, and everyone collectively worked towards the community's welfare. For example, there was no sense of individual ownership. The lands were collectively sown and harvested. Welfare, health, prosperity, and well-being. As time went by, hamlets grew into sizable villages that exchanged goods, mostly food, clothing, and tools. Slowly, networks of communication and exchange were established among those villagers, and some of them grew into small towns. New technologies appeared, for example, pottery for making pots and other clay objects, and the use of metal, copper first, iron later, which helped make durable tools, objects of daily use, and ornaments. Hamlet, a small settlement or small village. We will see in chapter 6 how this stage prepared for the emergence of what is called civilization. For now, it is important to remember that this early progress of humanity had to face many challenges. At some critical times, humanity could have almost disappeared as some earlier species did. We will never know those early humans to whose courage and persistence we owe our existence today. Before we move on, we have explored some ways to learn more about our past. The concept of timeline helped us understand the sequence of historical events at different times. There were different ways of measuring times, years, decades, centuries, millenniums. Thousands of sources of history are Many. They help us reconstruct and interpret historical events. We have also had a brief look into the life of early humans, and now human societies grew more complex in time. Questions, activities, and projects. Question number 1. As a project, write the history of your family or village if you live in one, using sources of history at your disposal. Ask your teacher to guide you. Question number 2. Can we compare historians to detectives? Give reason for your answer. Question number 3. A few exercise with dates. Place these dates chronologically on a timeline: 323 CE, 323 BCE, 100 CE, 100 BCE, 1900 BCE, 1090 CE, 2024 CE. If King Chandragupta Maurya was born in 320 CE, which century did he belong to? And how many years was that after the Buddha's birth? Rani of Jhansi was born in 1828. Which century did she belong to? How many years was that before India's independence? Turn 12,000 years ago into a date. Question number 4. Plan a visit to a nearby museum. The visit should be prepared with some prior research on the kind of exhibits the museum holds. Keep notes during the visit. Write a brief report afterwards highlighting what was unexpected, interesting, fun about the visit and the exhibition. Question number 5. Invite to your school an archaeologist or an historian and ask them to speak on the history of your region and why it's important to know it. Thank you.